Okay, here's part 2 of chapter 8, which is photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, there are 2 different types of reaction. There's the light reactions, also called the light dependent, because it's going to depend on light. It's actually going to need light in order for it to take place. And then the Calvin reaction, also called the light independent. It's also called the dark reaction. Now, that doesn't mean that the Calvin reactions occur in the dark, but it does not need light in order for it to occur. So here we have our chloroplast, right? Our light reactions are going to take place in the thylakoids, okay? Water's going to go in, oxygen's going to come out. We are going to get some energy and our electron carrier. Again, just like with cell respiration, we are going to have electron carriers. In cell respiration, we had NADH. In photosynthesis, we're going to have NADPH. I like to think of the P standing for photosynthesis. It doesn't. It stands for phosphate, but that's just an easy way to remember that NADPH is in photosynthesis. And the light reactions, again, we're also going to have solar energy or light energy. Now, in the Calvin cycle, we are going to take place in the stroma, so in the gel-like substance that fills up the chloroplast. We're going to have carbon dioxide come in, and then we're going to have part of glucose come out. We have CH2O. This will then become C6H12O6, otherwise known as glucose. So 2 reactions are going to be taking place. During the light reactions, different pigments within the thylakoid membranes are going to absorb energy, and solar energy can be described in terms of wavelength, and the wavelength is going to tell us how much energy it has, okay? So the shorter the wavelength, the higher the energy. So gamma rays, those are going to have really, really short wavelengths, tons and tons of energy, where radio waves have longer wavelengths and they're going to have less energy. Now, when it comes to wavelength, light, visible light, is kind of in the middle. It's only a small portion of what we call the electromagnetic spectrum. We as humans can only see light in wavelengths that are 380 nanometers to 750 nanometers, and we see this as color. Okay, visible light, like I said, contains various wavelengths. Violet or purple light has a short wavelength but high energy. Red, longest wavelength but the lowest energy. Only about 42% of solar radiation that hits Earth's atmosphere reaches the surface of the Earth, and most of it is in the visible light range. It's because we have the ozone layer and other things that protect the Earth from this solar radiation, okay, by the ozone layer. Now, most photosynthetic pigments, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and carotenoids, those are our top 3. There's other ones, xanthophyll, things like that, but we're just going to worry about 3, and they can absorb specific portions of light, okay? Now, you might be asking, why are lights green? Well, leaves green. Leaves are green because they reflect green light and do not absorb it. If we look right here, green on our wavelength, it is not absorbed, whereas purple light and red light are going to be absorbed. So why do leaves look green? Because they reflect green light. That's why they look green. You might see that question later on. Now let's take it and talk about the light reactions. Okay, so just like with cell respiration, you needed to know what goes in, what comes out, where does it happen. That's what you're going to need to know for photosynthesis. So for the light reactions in the Calvin cycle, you're just going to need to know what goes in, what comes out, and where does that happen. So for the light reactions, it takes place in the thylakoid membrane. There's two pathways, non-cyclic electron pathway and cyclic electron pathway. We're just going to hit on those two briefly. We're not really going to spend a lot of time on them, but just know that both of those are going to take solar energy to chemical energy in the form of ATP. And then we are also going to get some NADPH that is going to be important. So non-cyclic electron pathway, it's named because we have water is going to go in, NADP is going to go in, and we're going to get some NADPH and oxygen from it. It uses what are called photosystems, and these kind of help absorb the solar energy. Photosystem 1 and photosystem 2, like this bullet point says, it just consists of pigment, so chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B carotenoids, and electron acceptors that's going to accept those electrons from solar energy within the membrane. We say that the pigment complex is an antenna, okay, for gathering solar energy. Non-cyclic electron pathway begins with photosystem 2. The pigment is going to absorb solar energy. And much like with cell respiration, you have the electron transport chain. The electron carriers pass that electron. That's kind of how these photosystems react too. So energy is going to pass from one pigment to another until it's concentrated is what is called the reaction center. The reaction center is a chlorophyll A molecule. And those electrons are going to become energized, and once they become energized, they're able to move to another electron acceptor. Photosystem 2 would not work without replacement of electrons, and again, it's caused by splitting of water, so water has to go into the light reactions. That's where we get that hydrogen, and water is going to be released. In photosystem 2, an electron acceptor receives energized electrons from the reaction center, much like in photosystem 1. It's then going to send those electrons down an electron transport chain, very, very similar to cell respiration. And just like with cell respiration, when energy is released, we're going to get hydrogen ions that are going to get pushed through the space to create a concentration gradient. And then we also have an ATP synthase. So as a result of non-cyclic electron pathway, we're also going to get ATP, just in the same way that ATP is created in cellular respiration. Okay, photosystem 1 comes next. So with photosystem 1 and 2, they were named in the order that they were discovered. Photosystem 2 was discovered first, but it actually comes first in the non-cyclic electron pathway. I'll show you a picture in a second that describes it and shows it visually, but photosystem 2 comes first. You need to know that, okay? Then we have photosystem 1 that gets the same thing from photosystem 2, and from photosystem 2, NADP becomes, or photosystem 1, I'm sorry, NADP becomes NADPH. So from photosystem 2, we get ATP. Photosystem 1, we get NADPH. And both of those are going to move on. So here is a nice picture of the non-cyclic electron pathway. It's non-cyclic because it's not a cycle. You have to get refilled. And hydrogen is going to be providing those electrons. So hydrogen provides the electrons, oxygen gets released, it leaves through the stomata. These electrons go into our pigment complex, so chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B carotenoids. We get sunlight comes, excites these electrons. Once these electrons get excited in the electron scepter, they then go down an electron transport chain, just like cellular respiration. So we get some ATP created from this. And those electrons then go to photosystem 1, okay? The pigment gets the sunlight, which excites these electrons. Once these electrons get excited, they go down and they're going to create NADPH, okay? So that's kind of like a short version of what happens in the first part of the light reactions, which is the non-cyclic electron pathway.